Hi, I finished reading Goodnight Punpun a few days ago, and I had recorded my initial reaction when I exactly like right after I finished it, and that will be the majority of this video. But there's a few things that I wanted to change. So if you see me like this is after a couple days of reflection and actually putting thought into it. But the majority of this video is just going to be a long-winded rant about the storylines, about what I thought about the series, and just my immediate reaction. A fair warning though, there are about 10 to 12 different trigger warnings that I need to give you for this video and for this story in general. I'm gonna have to censor a lot of this. I wanted to read out a full list of the trigger warnings as well for those who may just be listening instead of watching the video. I'm gonna have to give these code names. I'm sorry, but they're gonna have to have code names because of YouTube and because I don't want to just have this on here with me saying everything verbatim before I get monetized, just in case it risks any of the monetization, you know. You know what I mean. So, we have with code names. I'll have like a legend, a not so skinny legend of like 12 different things right here. Unalive, unalive of another individual, SA, grape. A couple of these I'm allowed to say, so mental illness, child grape. I think I can say abuse, so I'm just gonna say abuse. SH, which is when you do things to yourself that you shouldn't, and both words are 4 letters. And then parental abuse, the ones that are like just specifications of certain words that I've already said, is hitting, biting, and stabbing. So those are all the triggers. If those are the kinds of things that you don't consume on a regular basis and don't like to consume and cannot consume at the moment, please click off this video. This video is not for you. If you would like to come back later when you are ready to consume this video, you're more than welcome to, but you don't have to. So without further ado, here's my initial reaction to finishing Goodnight Punpun. I just finished reading Goodnight Punpun, and like honestly, I want to cry. Goodnight Punpun is a story basically. If I had to put it into words, I would say it's a story that really grabs you by the balls. There was multiple times where I thought that I knew it was gonna happen next, and I straight up just didn't. Um, like probably at least 5 or 6 times I thought I knew it was gonna happen next, and I would write it down and it'd be like, oh, okay, that's not what happened. Um, I don't even know how many arcs I would say this one has, but I would say this is like my first anime-less manga I've ever like read. Hi, it's me again. I forgot that actually that's not true. I've read Black Paradox and Junjito's Cat Diary, both of these all the way through, and neither of these have animes. Because I've only read Dorohedoro all the way through, Beastars all the way through, and like that's it. I'm not like a major anime, major manga fan, but I'm trying to get back into it as a good habit to have. So the story of Goodnight Punpun follows this character, Punpun Onodera, who has a really rough life, if I'm being honest with you. His parents hate each other, but they still love each other enough to stay together, and they're both abusive in their own ways. It's not really easy to tell. Like they don't really tell you like how the abuse started, um, or who's like the main abuser. It's pretty both directions when you read the whole thing. At first, you think it's just the dad who's a shitty person, but then you realize they're both shitty. Poon Poon's mom does not love him, does not want him, never wanted kids, and thinks that Poon Poon has ruined her whole life. Yet she still loves him. She doesn't want to admit that to herself or really necessarily admit that to him. And the most she'll really do is just take care of him. But she's constantly like ordering him around and doesn't really care for his well-being beyond like having to take, the obligations of having a child. And then his father cares about him, but as the story progresses, his dad, is out of the picture at some point because there's a scenario where, and you don't find this out until later in the story, but Poon Poon's mom and his dad get in like this fight where his mom is basically like trying to kill herself, and the dad goes to like stop her, and she goes to like turn the knife on him, and so he, he hits her over the head with a fucking toaster, and Poon Poon wakes up and goes out to the room, and his father's like, Poon Poon, a robber got into the house. you believe me, right? A robber got into the house, you believe me, right? And then his dad goes to jail for a while, for hitting his wife over the head with a toaster. And Poon Poon doesn't know that he threw the toaster at her as self-defense. And he doesn't ever know that. I don't think that's something that Poon Poon ever knows. But another character that comes in much later, Sanshi Najo. So, I'm gonna pronounce these names so fucking bad. She's the only one in the story aside from the dad and the mom who I think know about that, aside from maybe even like his friends, but his friends being the dad's friends. But the dad is completely absent like after that. And so the mom, this is how you know she kind of cares about her son, but she doesn't really know how to care about her son because she, I think honestly, I think after reading this story, I think she's a schizophrenic. Um, and it's fucking sad. This story is like really sad. The whole point of the story, I think, after reading it, I think it's something along the lines of, well, okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Everyone's life in the story is like pretty fucked up on some level. And the world's supposed to end because there's this cult. There's this cult. The story, the thing about Goodnight Poon Poon is there's no amount of like me explaining this to you that is going to help you understand the way the story is because it is one, it twists and turns out the ass, somewhat confusing. Like there were when I first looked up like, oh, why did the author write Goodnight Poon Poon, which I've not looked into yet, and I really want to read that article, but I was like, I am not ready to read the article right now because that article is probably darker than the story was. Because what drives someone to write that? Probably real experiences. Because when you get to the very end of the story, and it's like really sad, but like it feels great, but it's like really sad. The character that I just named, that I just name dropped, that I probably pronounced wrong, Sashi Nanjo, she is a manga artist, but it's like it's spelled manga with a K A, and I think that I'm not without looking it up. I'm guessing that means that you're a manga artist, but you only write for magazines. So like mangaka is, I'm guessing, probably just for magazines. Real information here, if I got that right or not. Here's how you know. So that character, she's a manga artist, and when you get to the very end of the story, you realize that she's the one writing the story in the story. And it's like, oh, then is this story then based on real events? Like, I don't know. Again, here's the answer right here after I do the research. I hope the fuck not, but I don't know yet. I just don't know. And it's just like a really sad story. And I love the art style. I love the fact that the main character and his whole family are removed from society in a way that like is done through like the art. Like they're drawn as like little bird characters, and all the other people are drawn like regular people. Okay, to get back on the plot of Goodnight Poon Poon, there are so many different plots in this fucking story that I cannot keep my fucking head on straight. Everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own like well thought out like plot for the most part. Almost a lot of the characters have like, you get a real good look at them. But so I guess let's go back to the mom. After the dad's gone, and the dad is not reaching out to his kid, and you don't know that as the reader yet. But this whole time that you think that Poon Poon's dad has been sending him letters every month that are just like some nonsense bull, which obviously like once you find out that's the mom writing the letters every month, you realize no wonder there's some nonsensical bull every time because it's being written by what I think is the schizophrenic character who like just straight up is not linked in with reality but is trying her best to keep like the connection between the son and father together. But like Poon Poon never writes back his dad, I don't think. I don't know if I can remember correctly, Poon Poon never writes his dad back throughout the story like at all. So clearly at that point like Poon Poon like doesn't really care. I don't think he doesn't really care in a way that he like acknowledges. Um, and so when the mom dies, that's when you find out she dies of like, what does she die of? I don't remember. I don't think it's not. It is cancer. I don't know. I think it may have been cancer. I don't remember. You're gonna have to read this book, but I'm just saying. I'm just saying, I just wanted to talk about it. This is a video for people who've already read Goodnight Punpun, and if you want to listen to me rant about it endlessly, mindlessly, and with no amount of thought put into it, this is the video for you. Because I just want to think about it. So, to get back on the storyline, when Punpun's dad goes to jail, his uncle, who's his mom's brother, comes into the story, and you find out that this uncle has kind of put this thought in Poon Poon's head that if he like says, I think like dear God, tinkle tinkle hoy, would you find out where he gets that? And you're like, God, that's disgusting. Because where he gets that from is through relations he has with what is technically not an underage individual in Japan, but still it's disgusting. And also, like, the reason that, like, she's, like, pursuing him, like, again, it is fully the adult's responsibility to just say no, even if someone's going after you. Um, the only reason she's going after him is because she's looking for a man to fall in love with her to kill her mom for her. She's just looking to find some guy, some simp, who will listen to everything she has to say about how her mom keeps her locked up in a basement and beats her and convince him to murder her. And so when the uncle like doesn't manage to fall for that bait because his girlfriend comes home and he hides this young teenage, 16, technically legal in Japan, still disgusting. He hides her away and sleeps with his girlfriend grossly while thinking about this 16-year-old that's like, cucking. And it's gross. It's really gross. So that doesn't work out for her, the 16-year-old in the closet. And so she moves on and finds some other guy to sleep with and convince to like simp for her. And he eventually shoves her mom in. Okay, the uncle works at a pottery shop. The way that he and this little girl met is at a pottery shop, and this mom who's obsessed with the uncle keeps bringing her daughter over to do pottery classes. That's so the mom has excuses to keep coming by to like, you know, peep on her favorite pottery teacher. And yeah, so this girl finds a different guy in the pottery shop to convince, and that guy then shoves that mom into the kiln, and she burns to death. And he gets injured and all that. So that's where that part of that story leaves. And then Yuchi Onodera is the uncle's name. Yuchi Onodera, from what I remember, because I read this story within like a week and a half. It took me a week and a half to get through all of it. I only took like a 2 day break, maybe day and a half. I only took a day and a half break, but I had been like reading like maybe 2 volumes or so every day for 5 days or something. Is that math? Yeah, that math. Yeah. Yeah, I've been reading like 2 volumes for 5 days, and then I took a day and a half break, and then I read like 2 more. So I guess it only took me like 7 days of actual reading, but like it took like a week and a half almost. So yeah, I kind of sped run through it, but not like to speed run through it. Mainly, I just read it so fast that like I don't think my brain can really process everything that happened. And so the uncle and his girlfriend that he had at the time during the situation, they break up because he's unwilling to get married, and he's not the kind of guy who's like ready to like commit. No matter, he's been telling this chick like, oh, I'll commit, and then he just straight up doesn't. And so I think, if I remember correctly, she leaves him because he just won't commit. And then he's single for a while, and then he meets a different lady through a coffee shop. No. He meets a different lady because his sister's in the hospital. His sister's in the hospital, which is Poon Poon's mom. She's in the hospital for after being hit over the head with a toaster. Maybe it's brain damage. Maybe she's not schizophrenic. Maybe she has head trauma. But like she's still like kind of like obviously something's wrong with her. It's like severe depression or something. It's probably like some like postpartum depression that like never stopped. Um, if I like have to put a label on it, I'm just gonna say some kind of postpartum depression that she never got over, and then she maybe getting hit by the toaster is what makes her kind of like something's loose in there, at some point, because she's like, you'll have to see the chapter when she's dying. Um, it's you get to see from inside her brain and like what it's like to be her, and it's like having dementia, and it's really really sad. Like I like started to feel like crying reading it because it's just like so depressing to like have to like to like live in a way that is like so confusing for you and not really like knowing what your reality is. So she's in the hospital. The uncle comes by to with Poon Poon to check on her in the hospital, and she won't even talk to her fucking son because she doesn't give a shit about her son. And this nurse is helping her, and he notices like this nurse in like the classic like anime like, oh, I noticed like hot girl helping my sister. And he eventually later on, after like seeing her like in there, notices her working at a coffee shop. I think she like quits nursing, and like some like 2 years later she meets her at a coffee shop. She's working at the coffee shop, and one day she like, I think she like writes like, oh, like, will you go out with me like on a napkin or something? And he's like, oh, I'm busy today. And she's like, oh. And he's like, but I'm not busy tomorrow, so let's go on a date tomorrow. I don't remember how the date goes, but this is the woman he ends up marrying later in the story. So here's where things get dark again for Poon Poon. I'm not even touching on like the main part of the story yet. The main part of the story, like, there's so many different main parts of the story. Life is a series of main arcs, and there is no one main thing. And that's kind of, I feel like, what Goodnight Punpun kind of touches on, is that life is a series of events that happens to you. No. Okay. Sorry. Um, where was I? So we still technically even haven't even like touched on what, it's not the driving force of the story, but it's kind of like the beginning to end part of the story. And like the middle part is all like what happens between what is considered like the main part of the story. So, again, I'm going to get all these names horribly butchered. So, Midori, um, she's a waitress at this cafe, and eventually the owner of the cafe is like, "Hey, I can't keep running my cafe. I got shit going on. I'm either going to sell a cafe or rent it out to someone." And she's like, "I've always wanted to run a cafe. Um, can I rent it from you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll give it to you for less rent because you've been working for me for so long and I like you." And so she starts renting this cafe, and it's going well. And one day, um, if I remember correctly, I don't know if I do remember correctly, something happens between the uncle. Did I turn it like I didn't change it all the way off to no messages? No messages, please, right now. Just not right now. This is the part of the book that like, this is when the book starts to like have meaning to me as a person. Okay, I guess like the book already had meaning to me in certain ways. Like when life kind of just happens to you, things that you don't necessarily have control over. And when I say don't necessarily, I mean like things you literally just don't have control over. So back to it. Midori Okuma and the uncle. At some point, I don't remember if he cheats on her or if he just disappears. All you need to know is he's gone. He's been out of the picture for a very long time. He's missing. No one knows where he is. He's not talking to anyone. And she sees this guy in the street when she's walking with Poon Poon, and she's like, "Oh my god, it's him!" And then the guy turns around, and she's like, and he's like starts like talking some mumbo jumbo to her, and it gets really depresses her, and makes her sad. And she's like, "Oh, it's not him." And she like kind of like emotionally like is having like some like sadness about that. And this is while they're on the way, her and Poon Poon are on the way to go to her cafe to go clean up the cafe a little bit. And she's in her feelings about the uncle. And this is where the trigger warning starts. Here's the timestamp for when I stop talking about the triggering topic. The trigger involved is SA, specifically rape, which I'm gonna have to block out. Yeah, she's in her feelings about it, and she is trying to get like Poon Poon to like comfort her. And then she takes it way too far, disgustingly way too far. She puts her hand down his pants, and he's just like, he like gets up, and he's like, "What the fuck? Like, that's not okay." Like, what? He doesn't say it, but he's like, physically, his body, everything about the way he is being is like, "What the fuck?" You know. And she convinces him to comfort her still because like, oh, he cares about this woman, he trusts this woman, And he's like, he, because he's, 15, and he's in a situation where he's never been in this situation before, he doesn't know what the fuck to do, and he wants to comfort her, just not like that. So he goes back to like comforting her, and she goes again to take advantage of him, and he just is like, you know what, I'll just let. There's no letting when it comes to that situation. There's no letting. It is what it is. It's, it happened. Um, and you were put in a situation and you didn't let it happen. It happened to you, and you were too young to understand how to get out of that situation. So in Poon Poon's wording, he's like, I let her do it. Like, you didn't. You didn't. You were put in a corner emotionally, and you just did not know how to get out of there. And so she rapes him. And she's like, oh, I really like you. And it's like, disgusting. Like, leave me the fuck alone. And he leaves. And the next day, I love the way that the author writes this. The next day, he's angry at the sun for rising and setting without the consent of the people on the planet, and how the sun never considers how people feel about it being, you know, going as it does. And like, as much as like that doesn't necessarily make sense to be upset about that, within the context, it's like he's projecting his feelings onto an inanimate object because he's incapable, as someone who's like gone through this for the first time, like he's incapable of rationalizing what the just happened. He's incapable of knowing where to put his feelings, because he's a 15-year-old boy who's been like really throughout like the motions, like the before this part of the story has been like really like, oh, I really want to like have sex with someone, I really want this like emotional connection with someone, and I really want it to be like important, you know like, I mean, I don't really know if like Poon Poon like wants it to be important, but like he very much like wants to have sex, and that being the first time it like he has like, obviously it's not sex, but the first time he has like the physical action of it, it's taken out of his hands, it's out of his control, and it really fucks him up more so than like other things. And he already has this mentality of like, oh, my life isn't bad enough for me to be upset and me to be depressed and me to be all fucked up, because his mom would constantly be like, oh, well, like you should be happy, you have nothing to be upset about. Well, clearly this kid has a lot of things to be fucking upset about. So he doesn't give, is credence the right word? He doesn't give any credence to any of his feelings or any of like why he is the way he is. And that follows throughout the rest of the story, is he becomes a very fucked up individual because he never understands why he is the way he is, and he never gives himself the room to grow as a person and to understand that it's not his fault and he's allowed to feel the way that he feels, and he needs to process those emotions, but he just never does. He never does. Even at the end of the story, he really doesn't process those emotions. He kind of just like moves on somehow. I mean, some of us just move on somehow. We just like are like, put it in a box, leave it somewhere else, move on, and somehow I've made it, you know? And that's only in like chapter 50 out of 100 and I think 47 chapters. So it's only 1/3 of the way in the book that we are at right now. Here's the thing I didn't touch on about the rape of Poon Poon when he's 15 by his aunt. The sad shit. This is the validating shit about this shit. The way that it's framed for someone like, is that when look, level with me here. Level with me here. When something like that happens to you and no one around you believes you, it still happened. It still happened to you. Your feelings are valid. What happened happened. It doesn't matter what they think. They weren't there. They don't know. And even the person who did it, and even the person who was there, if they deny it, you know. You know what happened. You knew what happened to you. Your feelings are valid. Your existence is valid. Don't fucking listen to any of them. Okay? And this story, I feel like this story says that without having to say it. Because as a third person, as an outside perspective, you can see that it literally happened. And you can see that literally everyone who knows, the two people that know, his uncle and his aunt, are denying the fact that it was rape. Like his uncle's like, I know that you slept with my now wife while I was gone, and you know what? It's okay that you did that. I forgive you. Excuse me, what? You know? And I think I think that I feel like the feeling that I felt was validating, for me is feeling like as I just said, it clearly happened. Clearly the people around him are not giving him the care that he deserves and the respect that he deserves and the dignity that he deserves in being validated. You know. And yet as the reader, he is valid. You know. That's my takeaway from the story on that part. From that point, a lot of what happens after that's a blur for me. If we gotta circle back, we gotta circle back again. We gotta circle back again to the beginning of the story because there are several different lines. So I guess plot point A is he is in elementary school and a new girl is introduced to the class and her name's Ayoko Tanaka. And the second he sees her, he is like smitten with her, absolutely in love. And he finds out that she's into space and he's like, oh my god, I have to make my whole personality about liking space to get this girl's attention. And so he's able to get her attention through like writing a essay about like, oh, I want to become like a spaceman, basically. I want to go to the stars, I want to go to space, I want to study, I want to be a scientist. And he is supposed to do this presentation in front of the class, I think, about what his dream is. And he lies about what his dream is. He says, oh, I just want to have a normal life. I just want to, like, have a normal job, and I just want to be happy. And he gets embarrassed and runs because he's like, I lied, and I just want to get out of here. And he throws the paper away, and she finds the paper, and she's like, why'd you lie? This is really cool. And so that's how they start their connection. This storyline also gets very dark. You find out later on that she is like the daughter of like a cult family, and this cult believes in like this like god who like has this weird mineral water. It's very hard to explain. It's very hard to explain, but they're kind of like multi-level marketing cult. That's how I'm going to put it. Multi-level marketing cult that sells water. But further down the story, when we meet her again, because eventually she's just like gone. You don't see her again. She's like moved out of town or something like that with her mom. And you just don't see her from like, oh, I mean, it's not really important. Some details are not really important. Like, yeah, she like dates another guy in like middle school, and like obviously she's not over Poon, and she's never over Poon. Like, she's like also like has had that feeling of like she saw Poon, she's like, oh my god, that I want to be with that person, and they're both equally obsessed with each other. But you don't find that out until they meet again later on in the story. But all you really need to know is that she's gone from the story from I want to say like maybe middle school age until he hits like 20. So like for I want to say like I don't remember if it's been a decade. No, it's not a decade. Cuz your middle school is like 11 and like 12 or something. So like let's say that she's been gone for like 8 years of his life. Let's just call that the math. She's gone out of the storyline for quite a while, and when he meets her back again when he's 20, he like sees her like on accident, and he's so obsessed with her. When he sees her on accident in a different town, he gets an apartment in that town. This is why I'm gonna miss certain parts of the story, because like when he moves to that town, then he meets other characters which also become important to the story. Like when he moves to this town, that's where he also meets Sanchi, the manga artist we talked about earlier. She also like falls in love with Poon, and like a platonic like sexual partner friend way. Like they don't ever like date properly, but they are definitely in some capacity like best friends who like fuck but never date, but also like it's very convoluted there. There's like a situationship. Let's call it a situationship. But they still care about each other, just not in like a traditional way. But the point being is he gets this apartment in this town, and eventually he runs into her again, and she like they go on a date, and she's like fully pretending that her life is fine, everything's fine, and he's like sitting there, he's like, this is not the same girl I met. Fuck her. I want to ruin her life for wasting 8 years of my brain on this bitch. I'm gonna ruin her fucking life. I'm gonna kill her. And then he tells her like how upset he is eventually. I don't think it's on that date, but eventually he tells her how upset he is that she is like happy and fine. And she's like, "Oh, well, I kind of been lying about that. Um I want to move away. I still live with my mom. My mom's abusive as shit, and I need to move away, but I want her approval." Well, you're obviously not going to get her approval. I don't even know why they go back to the house. I do not know why they go back to the mom's house. She should have just fucking run away. If I'm being honest with you, she should have just fucking run away. But the plot, you got to ask the mom for permission in order to move the plot forward. So they go to the mom's house, which is also Aiko's house. And they try to ask for permission. They don't really get, I don't even remember, I don't think they actually get into like the permission getting part. The mom immediately, because she's an abusive person, just gets upset and goes to like start hurting Aiko, like emotionally, because like I don't think it quite gets violent yet at first, but basically I think Aiko says something along the lines of like, I'm leaving, and the mom, the next panel is like the mom like has a knife and she's like jumping at her, and it's like the other thing about that is that the mom is allegedly like from like here down, allegedly she can't walk, and that's the reason she can't have a job, and that's the reason that her daughters had to have a job this whole time to support her. And okay, yeah, that's what she's saying. She's telling her mom, I'm moving out of town. I'll still send enough money to support you, but I cannot live with you anymore. And the mom's like, oh, you're abandoning your mother. You don't even love me. Like, she's just being emotionally abusive. And so she goes, she like drags herself across the floor to the kitchen, gets a knife, and somehow in the next panel she's like kind of like somehow she's like launched herself off the floor. I'm assuming she's been lying this whole time about this injury, if I'm being honest with you. She injures Aiko, and Poon defends her and gets the knife from the mom, and like I think he stabs her just like once and like beats her up a little bit, and then she goes unconscious. And then you hear a ding dong at the front door, and it's the UPS guy. It's the UPS guy, and Poon, instead of just ignoring the doorbell, is like, I'm gonna go get the door. And mind you, we don't know this. We as a reader don't know this. But as Poon's walked away, Aiko goes up to her mom, realizes she's still alive, and starts stabbing her until she's dead. And Poon has to live with the fact that he thinks that he murdered her mom. And so they wrap up the body, they take the body to his place. And I'm gonna have to give another major trigger warning for the next part that I'm about to say. So here's the timestamp of where to skip if you're not interested in hearing about one of the more disturbing things I'm about to say. And at this point, Poon takes advantage of Aiko and does to her exactly what was done to him by his aunt, and coerces her into sleeping with him. Very forcefully, to the point where she does bleed. And it's, obviously very disturbing on purpose, but for me, yeah, I just wanted to say that it was disturbing. At first I didn't grasp the fact that it was what it was, because I was reading the panel too fast and I had to go back, and I was like, okay, wait, like, why is she bleeding? And then I realized, oh, this is now the third time that this kind of thing has happened. Now, at this point in the story, I realized that the authors used the rule of threes in a way that I've honestly never seen it done before. This is the third instance of almost grape to grape. I hate the censorship, I'm sorry. The first instance being the uncle and the 16-year-old pottery student, Poon Poon and his aunt, and now Poon Poon and Aiko. It's really interesting for me how, because, okay, so the uncle eventually down the line tells the aunt about what he did in the instance with that 16-year-old, but before she does what she does to Poon Poon. And I think, honestly, I think that him telling her that and her being like, oh, it's fine, is part of like why it's in there again. Um, because like she condoned it the first time. In my head, I feel like it's like a jealousy thing that she does the same thing to Poon Poon as he almost did to someone else, him being the uncle. And then Poon Poon then rolling that abuse over onto Aiko. You know, it's just a cycle. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that it's a cycle of abuse and it repeats itself 3 times in within the story. So then they start they start running basically in the mom's car with the body in the trunk, and they find somewhere in the forest to dump the body. And they dig a hole, they dump the body, and then they just keep going. And they keep going. And as they keep going, Poon Poon starts getting like more and more like just verbally abusive towards Aiko, and it's like really sad. He starts calling like her like a stupid bitch, and is like putting her down all the time. And it's like, well, you're just like your father, okay? Um, and he's just fucking abusive. He's a demented, abusive person at this point. And that reflects through like the way that his character is drawn. He goes from being like this innocent little like tiny bird guy to, I love this. I love it. He goes from like being a little bird when he's like being himself. And when he is in this like demented state, he's like a normal, like from here, like all of this is like a normal dude, and like from like here up, it's just like this giant like black like tube. It's hard to explain, really. And there are moments where he like snaps back to being regular Poon Poon, and he's just like this little bird again. And I like those parts. I really like showing like the inside of the character's brain by changing his physical form. I like that aspect a lot. But yeah, so they keep running, they keep running. And then over the news, they hear breaking news. Like, this is like, I feel like this is at least like a couple days to like a week later. Like, there was a hiker, and the hiker finds the dead body, and then the dead body's identified, and they're like, oh my god, the daughter's missing. We gotta find the daughter. Here's her name. And if we can find the daughter, then we'll have a lot of like questions answered. And they kind of freak out. And instead of staying in the town that they used to like agree that they were going to move to when they were little kids, they were like, hey, let's move to this one town and like fuck off and start our own life together. Because we're both from abused families and we can't do this shit no more. So instead of staying in the town that they've always wanted to like end their lives in together, in like a happy, not like a in like a happy way, you know, in old age, from my understanding. Instead of staying there because they just can't now, they keep running, and again, Poon Poon's still being abusive. Mind you, they're both also injured, and so like they're kind of physically going through it at the same time as they're running. And there's like the thing about the story at this point that I don't necessarily like is that you keep like thinking that the character Aiko has died multiple times, but like she's not dead. There's like 2 times where, or like there's a couple times where like I think that Poon Poon's dead or that Aiko's dead, and like they're not dead. And you're like, how would you survive all that and not die? So they get to like this beach area. I'm sorry that I keep having to like pause this to give you trigger warnings. And at this point, if you're still here watching, you probably don't need another trigger warning. But if you don't want to know how Aiko passes away in this story, skip to this timestamp. And Poon Poon, unbeknownst to Aiko, has planned to kill her and then kill himself. And he starts to like kill her, and for some reason, it's not really clear to me. It wasn't clear to me, or I'm just not remembering. He doesn't kill her, and he doesn't kill himself. And then they move on for like a little bit, doing the same thing that they've been doing, running and being abusive to each other, or him being abusive to her. And eventually she just fucking hangs herself. And it kind of comes out of left field in a way. Um, but I think in a way like it helps Poon. I think Poon's a little bit happy that she's dead. Um, because realistically she's the one who killed her mom and Poon technically didn't do it. Poon like only defended her. Um, but he starts carrying her body with him. Not everywhere, but he starts carrying her body with him. And it's like he stops in a little town that he thinks is abandoned, but like it's not abandoned. And two kids come up and they're like, "Yo, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, shit, I left my bag at the last location." He's like, "Can you watch her, but don't pester her? My friend's like tired." And like she finally just fell asleep. Like, don't pester her. And he left her body with these two kids. And he goes back, grabs the stuff, finds a note in the thing that says, "Do not forget about me," in her bag. And he comes back and like her body's gone. There's no like resolution in that. Like her body's just like gone. And then he goes back home. He goes back home. He goes to this abandoned building that they both went to when they were kids. And they saw the stars and they saw all the constellations. And he's like, "I hope that I can sit here during the same time of the year and see the constellations again." He's not able to see constellations. And he here's another thing. This god, this Tinkle Tinkle Hoy god, lives in like his one of his eyes. I don't remember if it's left or right, but like I think it's because you're viewing the character from like this side. He's facing this way. He stabs his left eye. So he stabs his left eye out because God lives in his left eye. Don't know why, but God lives in his left eye. And like he knows that this god is just him talking to himself, but he's like, symbolically I need to cut out my left eye because this is where the pain lives. And he cuts out his left eye and he's like laying there bleeding. And Sanchi, which I know this is not going to make sense if you've not read the book, but Sanchi shows up, the manga artist that like he was friends with benefits with, and like they've been writing like a manga together, and like the manga company was like, "This is shit, like we're not going to sell this story because it doesn't like follow the rules of normal manga." And she's like, "You don't know what you're talking about." And she just caves and writes a good like a acceptable manga just to get her foot in the door. And she's like has this whole complex of like, I'm gonna be the one to save Poon, and so she goes back to like the factory because she's like she also like this abandoned building that's a factory because she also I think wants to go back to see if she can see the starry skies. They were also like she was like a middle schooler at the time, but she was also there in the scene where Aiko and Poon are at the abandoned building. And so she goes back for the same reasons and finds Poon there and then takes him to the hospital. And then he wakes up after like being in the hospital for a while, and she's like, "Okay, you're awake. I'm gonna go. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to talk about where you've been because he's been gone. We don't need to talk about where you've been for the past like long while. But if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here for you. And if you need me to advocate for you, I will." And so she leaves. Um, and then I literally just read it, but I have a hard time remembering things. Basically, then it kind of like skips forward. No, the police come. The police come and they tell her that he's a suspect in a murder, and she just starts crying. And she's like, "Oh, he's in that room." And so the police are like, "Yo, what's up?" And he goes to jail, I think, for like a little while, and then he gets out, and then the story skips. Well, he goes to the jail, and then the story skips, and he's out. And then we're in a different character's head that I don't remember the character. Like we get to this part, and I'm like, "Oh, who is this character?" And you find out he's another kid that was in elementary school with him, but very briefly at the beginning of the story, and he's now a teacher of a class in like the same scenario from the very beginning, where a little boy sees a new female student in the class, and he's immediately smitten with her. The cycle starts all over again. Basically, is kind of how the author wrote it. And you see Poon's happy. You see that he's put everything behind him and he's just happy to live his mundane life and spend the rest of his time with Sanchi, the manga artist, without being married to her or dating her. And also, like, she has a kid. Let's rewind back. Like, she and Poon were like sleeping together, and then they stop sleeping together and she starts sleeping with her ex-husband, and then her ex-husband gets her pregnant, and then she has that kid, which she was gonna like, she was considering, trigger warning, click, like literally click off for like a few seconds. She was considering getting an abortion because she's like, I don't want to be with this man. And then she was like, you know what? I don't have to be with that man. I'll just still have the kid. Because Poon didn't go with her to the abortion clinic because she was like, you know what? It's selfish of me to ask this guy who's not even the father of the child to go with me to this abortion clinic. So I'm just gonna be like, hey man, like you don't have to go. Um, it's fine. Like I'll just figure out how to go by myself. And she just never goes. So she has the kid, and by the end of the story, the kid kind of like sees Poon as a father, and he's like, "That's cool. I think the kid should have a father figure. I don't think it should be me, but I guess it's me." And that's kind of just where the story ends. The story just kind of like cuts right there, and it leaves you feeling like, at least me, it leaves you feeling like a little raw, but like happy in a way, because you're like, oh, okay, things turned out good for everyone.
Except for Aiko and the mom and literally any character that passed away.
But like, it's like, you know, I think if you were the kind of person who can handle a lot of fucked up shit, it's a really good read. I really liked it. It was a 10 out of 10 for me. I personally don't know if I would read it again anytime soon, but if I find myself in 10 years like, I just want to read something, anything, maybe I'll read it again. But I honestly feel like it's a one and done kind of 10 out of 10 personally, because it's like one of the stories like once you know all of the like twists and turns, like I think it loses some of its magic and loses some of its storytelling, and I think that's a big part of the book is like the experience more so of not knowing what's going on, not knowing what's going to happen next. So that's just my honest review of Goodnight Poon. Those are my afterthoughts on Goodnight Poon. My other thoughts on Goodnight Poon after finishing it was that it seems that the story for me, the moral of the story is that some things in life just happen to you and you can't control it. And all that you can control is whether or not that stuff turns you into a monster. And I feel like Poon never gave himself the time of day to reconcile with what he had been through and didn't process what he had been through, largely because his mom would constantly tell him that he has no reason to be such a depressed, anxious child, when clearly he has a lot of reasons to be. I mean, his parents argue every single day to the point where there's a scene like very early on in the story where Poon's praying to God. He goes, dear God, tinkle, tinkle, hoy. And then God comes over and God's like, what do you want, kid? And Poon says, I want my parents to stop fighting. And God says, I'm really tired of you asking me this question all the time. So clearly this kid has like every reason to be depressed because he's in a very aggressive environment all the time. So, if you've read the book, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about this story. I really recommend reading it if you are the kind of person who can handle it and can handle dark semi not fantasy. And hope you have a good day. And bye.